Hey everybody, welcome back to Uncut Jerusalem to the Tomb. We are exploring the events in Jesus' life up to between his from his arrival in Jerusalem up until his crucifixion and then his death. If you want to follow along with us today, you want to grab your Bible. We're actually going to read from Matthew 26. The last few days we've been in John, and John tells some epic events. We've been there for the last 2 days about Jesus's betrayal, his. I got people saying there's no sound. Can you hear me? Holler at me if you can hear me. Am I muted? Betrayal. All right, we're good. Am I muted? All right. People can hear me, I think. All right, so sorry about that. So John tells some amazing instances. If you begin to look in John 13, where everything picks up, John tells the story of Jesus washing the disciples' feet, tells about him, the confrontation of him identifying Judas as his betrayer, and Judas leaves. And then John tells really what happens beyond then, where Jesus begins to talk about his death and what's going to happen. So I would encourage you to go read John 13, 14, 15, up through 17. There's a lot of great things that Jesus says there that everybody needs to study and look at. But we're going to hop back to Matthew 26. There's where Matthew tells some events of that night, and I wanted to share it with you. I think it's really, really important. So if you're turning there to Matthew 26, I also want to say we have drive-in Easter service coming up this Sunday. Please be inviting people. Be prepared to come. We're preparing for it. We have people working right now to make that a fantastic event. Also tonight at 7 o'clock is going to be our prayer call, so check your text messages, and you should be able to hop onto our prayer call tonight, and send us some prayer requests via fredericklighthouse.org. All right, so let's hop in. Matthew 26. We are going to begin reading at verse 36, and we're going to go down through verse 46. It says, "Then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane, and said to the disciples, 'Sit here while I go and pray over there.' And he took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, and he began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed. Then he said to them, 'My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch with me.' He went a little farther and fell on his face and prayed, saying, 'O my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will.' Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping, and said to Peter, 'What, could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak.' Again, a second time, he went away and prayed, saying, 'O my Father, if this cup cannot pass away from me unless I drink it, your will be done.' And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. So he left them, went away again, and prayed a third time, saying the same words. Then he came to his disciples and said to them, 'Are you still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is at hand. The Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand.'" I want you to back up to verse 39 if you're following along. He says in verse 39, he went a little further, and he fell on his face, and he prayed, saying, we're going to get to those words in 1 second. But in this moment here, Jesus is incredibly sorrowful. The weight and the burden of what is about to transpire is resting on his shoulders, and he feels the weight. And I honestly believe that in a lot of ways, even still, as Jesus had told his disciples, look, here's what's coming, they still didn't totally understand. They didn't get it. And Jesus is incredibly sorrowful. He tells them, sorrowful unto death. He's incredibly heavy with the weight. And he says in verse 39, he went a little further, fell on his face and prayed, saying, "Oh, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." I honestly believe that this is where the victory of Calvary was really won. When Jesus submitted himself to his purpose and to the will of God for his life, and he surrendered right then and there. He said, "I would rather work this out any other way, but not my will, but thy will accomplished." Your will, God, do what you're wanting to do with me and through me in this hour. And if there's any other way that could do it, let's do it that way, but it's not my will, it's yours. And Jesus taught his disciples how to pray that way. "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." And when we begin to pray like Jesus prayed and we surrender, he even tells the disciples, look, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And he overcame that desire in his flesh to not go through with what he was about to go through, to not submit himself to it. But the Bible tells us that he willingly laid his life down, he submitted himself to the shame and the pain of the cross to purchase our freedom. And I believe it was in that moment that Jesus really won the battle over death. When he said, "Father, not my will, but your will accomplished. I would rather it be any other way, but if this is what it takes to redeem your children, then bring it on." And I love that. I love the fact that you see Jesus. You've heard me say this before if you remember the church. There's always this contention between the spirit and the flesh, and we've got to decide which one we're going to give into in any given moment. You know, the Bible tells us that they're contrary to one another. And we see this in Jesus. Jesus is saying, I don't want to do this. But Father, if this is your will, let it be so. I'll take this cup and I'll drink of it and I'll endure it because this is your plan for my life. And I'm so thankful that in the garden, he won that battle. In the garden, on his face in prayer, Jesus won the battle for us and conquered sin when he said, "My flesh does not get to choose or dictate to me what I'm going to do. I'm submitting myself to the will of God." And we have to do that every single day as believers. We have to submit ourselves to God's will and God's plan for our lives. I'm sure everybody here today watching this or who may watch it later, you might be in an instance where you thought, "Man, I don't know how I got here. I never saw this coming." We're dealing with a situation like that. We never saw this coming. We never thought that we would be streaming only online services and all those things. But we're saying, "Hey, God, this is your will, so we're going to make the best out of it. We're going to do what we can, and we're going to move the kingdom forward, even when we might be limited in certain ways." God's not limited. We might be limited, but God's not limited. God can do things that we can't even begin to imagine. And so when we bring our flesh into subjection, and we say, "Father, not my will, but your will accomplished. I'm going to go with this because you're leading us in this direction. I'm going to give it my all," then I know there's going to be a blessing come out of it. And that's exactly what Jesus did. He submitted his flesh to the will of God, the purpose, the whole reason that he came, the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. And I'm so thankful that in the garden, he won victory for you and I. Thanks for joining us. Uncut, Jerusalem to the Tomb. We'll be back tomorrow with another event and another instance in Jesus' life leading up to his crucifixion. And tomorrow we'll actually get there. So we love you. We're praying for you. Don't forget prayer call tonight at 7. If you didn't get the text message, send me personally a text, and I will make sure you get that login information for the prayer call. And don't forget, tell everybody you know, drive in church right here in the parking lot, 7857 Gambrill Park Road, Easter Sunday morning, this Sunday at 11 o'clock. We love you. God bless you.